Hello, everyone, and welcome to this morning's program. I'm Amherst Williams, the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of Museums, and with me is my colleague Emily Collins, our Membership and Programs Manager. I'm so pleased to have you with us today as we get an introduction to ConnCRIS, the State Historic Preservation Office's new Cultural Resources Information System, which has been in the works for a very long time, and I know our colleagues from SHPO are really excited to share it with you all today. As Emily mentioned, this program will be recorded and it'll be up on our YouTube channel afterwards. If you have any questions as we go, feel free to pop them in the chat, and Emily and I will queue them up for our presenters after they're finished with their presentation. I'm so pleased to have with us today Kevin Berger, who's a GIS analyst, and Jenny Scofield, the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer and National Register and Architectural Survey Coordinator, both with the State Historic Preservation Office here in Connecticut. And without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to them. They have a presentation as well as a live demo of the system for us. So take it away, Kevin and Jenny.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Just for anyone who may not know, the State Historic Preservation Office is sort of the in-state government entity that oversees a historic preservation ethic in the state. There is a SHPO in every state that was created from the National Historic Preservation Act. And one of our federal responsibilities is to identify and document cultural resources. And cultural resources are places of historic significance as well as archaeological sites. So the reason I'm explaining that is because that has to do with ConnCRIS. ConnCRIS is the first time that we have digitized our entire collection of cultural resources records. And just quickly, Kevin can explain this more later. We have 3 different levels of access to ConnCRIS. One is a public version that has a bunch of data points showing locations of cultural resources. The middle level of access allows you to view associated PDF files for all of those data points. And then the third tier of access gives access to archaeological information and restricted information to those who need it for various projects. So we're going to walk through all of the different layers within ConnCRIS. But first, I just wanted to share some information about some of the files that we have in our office. So when we digitized, we were working with all kinds of different paper records, microfiche, Mylar maps, all of those types of things. So you will see in ConnCRIS that there are layers for each type of historic designation. Some people aren't aware there are actually 4 different types of historic designation in Connecticut. So those are National Historic Landmarks, National Register listed property, State Register listed property, and locally designated places. All of those you'll see in ConnCRIS have points for properties that are designated, as well as polygons for areas or districts. And then in addition to designation files, you'll also see a lot of information that was collected through various survey efforts. So we survey archaeological sites and have site forms in the restricted level of access. We have mapped areas that have been previously surveyed. And for anyone not familiar, a survey is different than a historic designation. A survey is a way to sort of collect some baseline information about a place to identify that it's there and understand some of its history and chronology. So we have town-wide surveys various themed architectural surveys. You'll see some, bridge information, cemetery information, all kinds of different stuff. So those are just some of the layers that you'll see. And just some fun facts. So we started our ConnCRIS project during just before COVID. We shipped all of our files out to a contractor who scanned them as they were building, helping us build this system. So you'll see there are now 100,000 data points within the ConnCRIS system. Every single property that's in a historic district is identified with its own data point and color coded by its category. So if something is contributing to a historic district, it has a color. If it's been surveyed, it has a certain color. And there's over 200,000 pages of stuff scanned, as well as some microfiche that was in sort of the back closet of our office that people would have to come in and turn on the fiche machine to be able to view. So that's pretty exciting for us to be able to have that online.
Do have to unmute myself. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with GIS. I'm sure people know of what Google Maps is, and I guess you could look at ConnCRIS as a Google Maps of our historic inventory. But I just put up a quick, well, maybe not such a quick definition of what GIS is, but what it is it's a GIS is a geographic information system that creates and manages, analyzes, and maps all types of data. GIS connects data to a map and integrates where things are with what things are like at that point on the planet in our environment. And this just helps us create a foundation for mapping and analysis to use for planning purposes and all types of stuff like that. And it's also a database that holds a ton of information, which we'll be showing later. And it's very expandable, and we have links to all these documents in the database. So I'm going to give a quick description of the tools that are in ConnCRIS, and then I'm going to give you a live demo of the application, just so you could be familiar with the tools, because there's a bunch. If you're not familiar with GIS, it's similar to Google Maps, but it's not exactly the same. They have their own terminology for some things, and the way things work is specific to the application. So this is just a quick rundown. And I put the icons on the screen so you could see what they look like. We have the legend. So the legend's only going to show, there's a legend and a layer list. The layer list is a selectable list where you could display all the data that we have in ConnCRIS, available in ConnCRIS, and you could check it on and off. And it'll only show up in the legend if you have it checked on. And then we have a base map gallery, which allows you to select different underlying base maps below the data that we have in our database. So most of these base maps are being served up through the cloud. We have a state 2019 flight, which is kind of the base map. And they actually have a new flight that they did conduct, so we'll be updating that when that one's available. And that one was from 2023, spring of 2023. And then there's a tool where it's a little bit more advanced for advanced users, where you can add your own data or data that is out in a community off of the Esri community. So Esri is the one who provides the software for ConnCRIS. And then you can add bookmarks to places that you go to all the time. So if you're frequently visiting just one town, you could bookmark the town and always get back to that town. The only way the bookmarks are saved is if you have a login, because without a login, it won't save it because it doesn't have anything to tie that bookmark to. And then there's also a swipe tool where it'll allow you to compare such as the 2019 imagery with the 1934 imagery, and it slides back and forth so you can look at it in one screen. And the about is about. It gives you information and links to the tutorials. And then there's also a feedback form on that about, and the feedback form is integral for upkeep of the ConnCRIS database, because there's many of the points that are not in the correct location. And with people that have institutional knowledge of and regional knowledge of the towns and the districts will know where these points should be. And if you fill out the feedback form, then we could update the database and get them in the correct spots. And then there's also a print function where you could print a customized map of the area that you have. I'm not really going to get into the print function unless people want to see that, I guess. So if you put in the comments, yeah, show me this print function, I could go over that, because I don't know what people's access to a printer is. And then here's just what some of the tools that I linked to will show. So the first one's a legend, and so if you look over at the layer list, what I have checked on is showing up in the legend. I'll get more into the layer list when I do the live demo because it's pretty long, and there's other layers underneath the local historic district that you can see. The base map gallery those are the 9 base maps that you could choose from. Bookmarks, you could just, wherever your view is, once you hit add, it's going to just create a bookmark where you are. And then the add data, if you open up the add data, it'll show you what's available within the community of either the state or through ArcGIS online community, which most people will probably not use that often. You can also add some other things. You could add your own custom files to it too, if you have the correct format. And then the about page. So it just gives you information about where the platform, and then there's the feedback form link right there. And then in ConnCRIS, there's multiple ways you could get to a spot that you would like to go to. One of the easiest, obviously, to pinpoint, get exact location, is to use the address search bar. The address search bar in ConnCRIS searches by address, but also searches by what's in our database. So if you know the name of the feature you want to go to, the historic property you want to go to, if there is a known name attached to it in ConnCRIS, you could type it out in the box over here where it says 450 Columbus Boulevard or Florence Grizz. And as you type it, it'll populate below. So you have to kind of be patient with it because sometimes it goes slower than others, and it depends on your internet connection because it is searching through a lot of data to find the correct spots for you. And then once you click on it, it'll bring you to, so in the drop down here, if you click on the address, it'll bring you to that location. And then there's other navigation tools. There's a zoom in and zoom out, which you can also use the mouse scroll, that I'm demonstrating to myself while the screen's up, the scroll wheel on the mouse or the plus and minus keys on the keyboard. The home button will bring you back to the initial view of the map, which I'll show that. My location is if you're on a mobile device or on a desktop, it'll bring you to the location of the GPS on a mobile device, but then on a desktop, it'll bring you to the location you are by your IP address according to the browser. Full screen just gets rid of all the address bar and the bottom bar. I don't know, it's not really all that useful. And then previous extent and next extent, well, if you're zooming back and forth, you could go and say you zoomed out accidentally, you could hit the back button to go to the previous extent to get back to where you wanted to go, where you were previously. Some of the advanced tools are, there's a selection tool that you could draw just a regular box rectangle, or you could do a customized rectangle polygon around things to get a more pinpoint area of where you want to select points on the map. Measure tool is a measure tool. You can measure area, distance. You can even get the XY points of locations. And there's multiple measurements you could pull out of it. You could do feet, meters, acreage. And then there's the two more useful ones that most people will end up probably using more often, besides the select tool, will be the query and the filter tool. So the query tool is kind of like it's more a more advanced selection tool. You don't have to draw the box around it, but they're predefined queries, and there's a drop-down list that'll give you, that I'll show in the live demo of some of the queries that you could choose from. And then the filter removes data from the map. So what the filter does is it filters out data from the map, so you'll have less points showing on the map or less polygons showing on the map, depending on the filter that you use. And if you're, well, I'll go to the next page because I'll explain that a little bit more. So filter or query. So the filter, as I was saying, it's going to remove data from the map. So it's only going to display the data that you're filtering on that map. And it's set, we have predefined filters. So I'll show some of those in the demonstration. And that, obviously, like I said before, that reduces the amount of data that's on the map. And the query is a predefined criteria for selecting the data on the map. And you could select it and then bring it up in a table and view the table. You could export the table and consume it in any spreadsheet program that you're using. The query will only query the data that's been filtered. So if you have a filter on, it's going to reduce the number of query points that you get. And that's really integral to know, because if you're looking for a whole state, but you only have a town, the whole state for some sort of query, and you only have one town filtered out, you're only going to get that town in the query. And so here's a example of a filter, and this is historic agricultural properties, and this is throughout the whole state, but we just zoomed into Branford here. And so it pretty much takes away all the other noise on the map, and you're only getting the agricultural properties that are listed in the areas.
Yeah, I'll just jump in for a second, Kevin. So for the folks joining us today, I think a lot of people will be interested in the research potential of ConnCRIS. So queries and filters are a way to search for information by area or by topic. It's important to know that the information that you're searching is whatever information is documented in our survey forms and our historic designation forms. So when we go through the filters, you'll see a lot of thematic choices. So this is an example where we zoomed in on a town and we're looking for properties that historically were used for agricultural purposes. You could then refine that more if you wanted to search by time periods. And this is really helpful if you're looking to develop a historic context for something, or if you simply want to know, what types of properties have been identified already. it's not necessarily going to represent the whole universe of everything that's ever had an agricultural use, because it's only going to identify the things that we have identified through our, documentation programs. And just another example, so we do have several social history categories, and we will be building on those. We do have some ethnic heritage categories and things like that, as we identify more of those, that context will grow. But we have several properties that were identified as being associated with women's history in their nomination forms, for example. And you could pull up all of those data points in the state, and then pull up the associated PDFs that will tell you about some of that history. And this is really important for us because there's an example up here, that Mary Townsend Seymour home. From the SHPO perspective, this isn't necessarily a property that would be considered historically significant for architecture, but it has some other related history that is significant. And so that's one of the reasons why we need to identify places like this and know about it.
So here's a just brief to show querying filtered and unfiltered information. So the first one is a query of filtered information, and I'm querying on this one by historic agricultural properties only in Brantford with colonial revival style, and you get one record that comes up, and you see the arrow pointing to the record over here, and it's only one. But if I unquery, if I take the filter off and I do an unfiltered query of just colonial revival style, I end up with 2,000 features. So that would be where you'd have to, if you're going to be querying and you have a filter on, there's always that you're going to have to be wary of making sure that the filter's off or on, depending on what you wanted to do. And then our homepage and the resources page, you can find a lot of information on both. Here's a click here. Here's a link here for just a public viewer, and that's not going to have any of the PDFs available on there. It's just going to be the points and where the properties are located. And then we do have a video and tutorials. If you click on this, it'll bring you over to the resource page. To request access is down at the bottom, and it would give you a form to fill out for access requests. And as Jenny said before, we have a tiered system. So public is open to anybody could view that. And then there's the second tier is just above ground resources. And then the third tier is everything with the archaeology resources included in there. And then on the resource page, we have, again, the user guide. There's a glossary. So if there's any question as to what some of the acronyms are, it'll be in the glossary. And then there's a bunch of tutorials. There are also, some of them are available in both English and Spanish, but all of them are available in English. And then again, we have the feedback down at the bottom. So please, if you find anything that's not in its right spot, submit a feedback and we can fix it. And then now I'll just go to the live demo. So this is what, after the splash page, there's a little disclaimer that comes up. Okay, does everyone see that? All right, so this is the disclaimer. So this will come up every time you load up the application. So, and here's the about. gives you some, just select features, gives you some information here. And then here's the feedback form. Then there's a story map here that'll give you give you some instructions on how to use the application on top of all the other data that we have in the resources. I'm just going to open this in another tab for now. But so here's the legend, just to show. I'll add the archaeology grid, and now it'll show up in the legend. So this archaeology grid is just showing areas. The red areas are where archaeology resources were found, and the blue areas are where they haven't been surveyed yet. So there could be archaeology resources there, but there hasn't been any survey there. All right. Preservation restrictions, these are just properties that have some sort of deed restriction on them or easement, correct, Jenny? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the preservation restrictions are typically properties that have received a historic restoration fund grant and have a temporary easement on the property, but there are a couple other easements in there as well.
And then the above ground resources, as we've talked about, that's going to be probably everyone's primary focus. We have the National Historic Landmarks, National Register non-contributing, State Register non-contributing, local, and inventoried. And we have them, they're organized from most important to the least important, kind of. And then for the districts we have, so I'll just turn off these so we can see. So we have the National Historic Landmark Districts. See, there's really not too many of them. The National Register Districts, State Register Districts, local, the Opportunity Zones, I believe this is correct. Yeah, that's the most recent one. And then there's also, the municipalities, and then there's also, I'll zoom in because the parcels are a lot. And then we also have parcels that these are coming from the state GIS office, and they have a lot of information also. If you click on the parcel, it'll give you a pop-up of all the information that's attributed to that parcel. And then the flood zone map is not showing up. So this national flood zone layer is coming from an outside source. And sometimes some of these outside source links we don't have any control over. So if they're not showing up, it could be a failure on their server side. So that one's an outside source link. And then we have the 1934 aerial imagery. So you could compare what's there with that. And then the Griswold map from 1925, or yeah, 1925, 1625. Let's turn that off. And then, so the base maps, if you just, even though it's not showing up, they'll still work. So I found sometimes this OpenStreetMap is pretty useful. So the OpenStreetMap is kind of a community created map. So some of the data on here might not necessarily be 100% accurate, but sometimes it's almost more accurate than Google Maps because you have everybody's submitting to it. And there's the topographic map. USGS maps. So there. And then this is where you could add your own data. You could put in emergency shelters if you want. Or you could add another file, which that's a lot more involved than what this topic is on. And in a bookmark, I was doing some work in this area earlier today. So if I click on it, it's running a little slow today. But this is I was moving some points around on Ansonia Road over here earlier. And then here is the swipe tool. So you'll have to have the 1934 imagery on. All right, there we go. So you could do a comparison. You know, that's a good spot. There's the school's gone. It's all farmland. Not anymore. And then the print function. So it just gives you a couple of things. You could change the title, the format, the size of the paper. And then there's some advanced functions you could use in there, putting in a scale bar and everything. And then turn off that. Oh, it's because I turned them all off. That's why none of them are coming up. All right, so the selection tool, well, I'll do this. All right, so you kind of have to wait for it to populate before you could, if you type too quickly, it won't come up. And then when you zoom to it, it'll give you the pop-up with all the links to the PDFs that you have available. You know, there's all of them are labeled, the local historic PDF, National Historic Landmark, National Register, and State Register. And if you just click on, we'll just click on the national one. And then it'll pop up and it says, click here to view the PDF. And so just the PDF will display. This will always be up there, and there's always going to be a dot on top of the building. So if you click that off, it'll get rid of the kind of the location dot. And then for selection, just click and you can select. So that'll select out these points. And you could turn on and off layers that you want to select. And then if you come over here, you could show the table of the selected features. And then as I was saying before, the measure. It'll give you how many acres something is. Do mileage. Or you could get the coordinates. Right there. And then here are the list of, so all these queries are already predefined. So if I go back to the default view, and this is what, when you select these queries, this is what it's going to be highlighted behind the point. It's going to look like this purple, bluish purple point here. Let it load. So this arrow here will open up the table and then reduce it all the way down so it's out of the view. All right. So I'll just do National Registry to show it's going to be a good number. It's probably going to take a little bit to show. All right, and then there's, so you can see all the bolder bluish dots. But you could, and then if you come in here, you can remove the results. So that'll get rid of that query, and then you go back and you could choose any of the queries to look for whichever is already predefined. And we could always add to the queries. If people need other queries created, there's always that, we have that ability to do that. And then the filter tool. So there's also a good number of filters. You could filter by any of these, filter by count. And then if you hit this little toggle button, it'll turn the filter on. So that'll get rid of. All right, here we go. And Sonia's got 1 point. That doesn't seem right. But let's. All right, it's going a little slow right now. But you could, as you toggle these on and off, it'll turn the filters on and off. And what the filter does, like I said before, was it's going to remove the data from the map, or remove, it's only going to have historic landmarks showing up, or it's only going to have the National Registered resources showing up, individually listed National Register showing up. So those will be properties that aren't part of a district. They were just individual nominations. And then the state register resources. So these will just reduce the number of points on the map here. And you can filter by dates, styles. As Jenny was talking about, the ethnic history association is not, it's not a very complete data set yet. That's a work in progress, and same with the social. Yeah, this is what the full screen looks like. And if I want to go back, there's that. Does anyone have any questions about the application? And then we could show the feedback form.
There are a few questions that have come in. If now's a good time to bring them to your attention. Does that sound good? Or do you
Yeah,
want to?
I think we could.
Okay.
I think we could do that and then go to
Yeah.
the feedback form.
So Lisa asks, can this be used for viewing a series of maps or aerial photos of a particular location in sequence? And I guess, then how would you do that? Because I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Well, it's you can add other data. So you would have to add, we only have what's available in the base map gallery, and what's available in the 1934. I know the state is working on georeferencing a lot of other maps that they have and orthophotography, which then you can add to it through the add to data. But you would have to add that yourself. Out of the can, it doesn't, we don't have that capability besides the 1934 and the 2019.
Yeah.
And the imagery that's served up from the Esri servers.
I would add that we have put in our wish list to the state GIS office, and they are working with other state entities. So for example, you can view the other statewide aerial maps through CT Eco. Some of the other historic aerial maps are not, those tiles, those images are not merged together in a way that can be imported into a GIS-based system yet. But the GIS office is working on many things like that. And as they become available and compatible, then we'll be pulling in the ones that we would want to use.
Great, thanks. I'm just gonna pop a link if folks aren't aware of it to the Yukon Magic site, which actually has a lot of that the 1920s, 30s and the 1950s or 60s aerial maps. So you can do some cool swiping there. So I'm just gonna pop that in the chat as well. Thank you for answering that question. I mean, I think I have sort of an associated set of questions about how that I'd like to ask at the end about how folks can help you and by providing feedback or improving the database. But I want to get to a couple of the other questions that have come through. So Terry asks, does a district also mean an individual state or national designation? And I don't know if you need clarification on that question, but.
So properties can be listed individually or as part of a district. And both of those designations kind of hold equal weight. What you'll see on the map is that every single property that is designated, either individually or as part of a district, does have an individual point so that you can click on that and get information about that particular property. One of our legacy cleanup items to do is that some of the very early districts, like those listed in the 60s or 70s, don't have itemized inventories. So in those cases, you might just see a polygon, but typically everything has a point. Does that clarify?
I'll let Terry chime in if she has a follow-up in the chat.
No, this is Terry. That's all good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry, for your question.
Yep.
Mark noticed that in Old Line, the 1934 aerial map is out of registration with the default base map in an odd way. Okay, east to west, but slightly askew on north to south. And he asked if there's any fix for that. And I guess my follow-up question is like, are those things that people should be noticing and bringing to your attention?
So that 1934 map is being served up from actually CT Eco. Okay. So the state library and CT Eco have Yukon Magic and CT Eco are the ones that are kind of in charge of the imagery layers. So we're the only points that I can fix are the points that are in ConnCRIS. So any of the boundaries, and the points, the above ground and below ground points. So anything from certified local governments up, the municipalities and down are other departments in the state that are managing those pieces of data.
I think certainly if there's high demand for a particular item is something we could at least communicate to the state GIS office, who's liaising with all those other entities. You know, they have quite a bit of work. They're doing statewide LiDAR, they're doing 3D aerial imagery, they're still correcting the statewide parcel information. And they know there's some georeferencing in maps that don't jive. So if there's a particular want, you know, we can communicate it, but it's not within our needs necessarily to edit that data.
Great, thanks for that clarification. Debbie asks, are Sanborn maps available, or are there any plans to include those amazing fire insurance maps as a resource, or are there challenges to doing that?
I think that's along the same lines as the other. I don't know what the availability of all of them are to in the state, and at what, how they are, and how, if they've been digitized. So it's,
yeah, they're available both through the state library and the Library of Congress for free. There are so many of them. I'm not sure. That would be a huge undertaking probably to link to them by specific property. But I think being able to view the layers that you can see in here still helps you compare to those. But you would probably for now need to pull those off of Library of Congress has color, but not full coverage. The state library has pretty good coverage, but it's mostly in black and white.
Great, thank you. I'm trying to find my list of questions here. Jay Sexton asks, is the database currently up to date? How quickly will it be updated once new listings are added or older listings are updated? Obviously, it's a moving target, right?
it's continually being updated.
Yeah.
So I know Jenny gave me a bunch of new National Registry nominations from like the past few years. I've added all those. The most recent one I've added. So it's just continual.
Yeah, I'm excited to share that Kevin is full-time staff with the State Historic Preservation Office. It's the first time our whole agency has ever had a GIS specialist on staff. So that is huge and amazing. And Kevin is working on mapping every single day. So our maintenance schedule it's pretty up to date. Since we launched, you know, we did cut off adding new listings while we were trying to get to launch. So there was a gap of a couple of years of stuff, but Kevin's actually already worked through a lot of that for a lot of the things, such as the National Register. So there are a few items where they might fall in the gap period, but at least for National Register, I think we're current.
Great. Thanks. Paul asks, are Connecticut archaeological preserves included?
Not on this version. It's on the third tier.
Okay.
So that's a higher tier of restrictions for those.
Can you say a
Yeah.
little bit about the levels of access and sort of, you know, who might be the sorts of people who would be using that third level, so people can get some clarity on, you know, sort of those tiers?
Yeah, I'll start with archaeological preserves. We did discuss which viewer that should be on. That's a finite number of things, and those are somewhat publicly known. So I'll start and Kevin can correct me. The public viewer is just quick and easy access if somebody just wants to get a sense of, you know, points if something is recognized or designated or not. All levels of access are free. We do not charge for anything. I think if you're going to be wanting the associated files frequently, then you should ask for the middle tier of access. And basically all you have to do is fill out the access request form, and then we'll work through sort of which level is appropriate. But I think anybody doing general research, frequently looking up the history of specific properties, would want the middle level of access, which allows you to get the forms. The people who don't really need login access are people that just want one file one time, or they just want something on their house and they're not planning to look up anything else. The third layer of access has restricted information, and it's restricted to either because somebody has requested it for privacy reasons, or because it's sensitive information, such as exact locations of archaeological sites and what they contain. And so the people who would need that kind of stuff are usually doing environmental compliance reporting, or sometimes it's members of tribes who also have their own data, or somebody doing a legitimate research project. That information is restricted, to protect sites from looting or other kind of harm. We also have some information protected of property owners to prevent pass and ATV riding and things of that nature. Kevin, do you want to add on that?
No, that covers the tiers and why the restrictions are put on those tiers.
And it also just has to, the reason there are levels and login, a requirement to log in, also just has to do with very technical information about how the system was built and how we're storing files within a state environment. And we won't bore you with that, but just the way that you make it is not so simple.
Well, it's clearly been a huge amount of work and a great investment of time and effort, and presumably money as well. And I think that's all very well spent, because I can see the value of this. Barbara asks, says that this is very cool, and is trying to think about basically like use cases. How could I use this by the various organizations I'm involved with? And I think this might be a question for Jenny. When you think about the audience here for the league, what are the kinds of things that someone might be wanting to learn about that they could use this system to do for them? I think you've offered a couple of examples through the demo, but I don't know if you have anything else in terms of use cases that really spring to mind when you're thinking about this group of historic preservation, museum, historical society folks.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. The biggest one is history context. So if you're researching a particular property, being able to view the location of that on the various layers that we have, with parcels, with topographic maps, with historic imagery, that can help you study how that property has changed over time. Or for example, if you are looking at agricultural property and you look at the topo map and you see certain features located in low-lying areas versus, high points, or you see something that was deforested and then reforested, you can get some history information. I think for folks that are running museums, or from the tourism aspect, you'll get some information about what else is around, what's been documented. Our Connecticut Freedom Trail sites, all have points in here. There's also, larger research. If you search by a time period, if you filter by a time period, or search, say 1800 to 1850, you'll get a collection of points of things constructed from 1800 to 1850. But then if you click on the associated files, that's where you're going to get history about all those different places, and you can start making some comparisons and doing some of your own analysis. And then, you know, we have lots of audiences who are looking for places that they can develop. People wanting to know if there's a financial incentive, or, you know, if they're in a local historic district and a change would be reviewed. We have a lot of people using the system just for simple, you know, what's the status of my property kind of stuff. And we do have, you know, the state's opportunity zones in here. We do have the towns that are certified local governments. So you can look up, you know, am I in a certified local government, which means more access to grant programs that we have. Opportunity zones, people pair those with historic tax credits, those kind of financial incentive packages. I hope that helps. You know, if you have other uses, ask me and we can let you know.
That's great. Thanks, Jenny. Kevin, I know you wanted to show the form, you know, and I think if you can just walk us through both the sign up form and then the feedback form and what kind of feedback is most helpful to you, that would be really great.
Any feedback. Obviously, mostly any feedback that'll help make sure the points are in the proper location. But really, any feedback is good feedback. If people are having issues with something or they think that the application should be changed in some way, it's always can be, as long as it's constructive feedback. It's so very much obliged. So on the home page, the share thing keeps popping up. All right, so to request access, it's down towards the bottom of the home page, and then it name, email, phone number, you know, organization, job title. You don't necessarily, you could be a private homeowner, because I've had private homeowners that have requested access for it, as Jenny said, and they only needed it for one property. So I emailed them back, and I just ended up sending all the information for his property instead of having another access. Because sometimes what we have to do is I have to create an account for people. So it's a couple step process to get activated and be able to see the restricted views. And we only have a finite number of accounts that we could give out. After we use them all up, we won't be able to give out accounts anymore to people, and we might eventually down the road be able to increase it. So if we had every individual homeowner want access to it for one property, we would run out of accounts really quickly. Then it's the SOI qualifications. You would need to fill out lots of
What's
times.
SOI? I'm not familiar with that abbreviation.
Yeah, it's okay if you don't have that qualification. This is for professionals who are seeking restricted access. They need to tell us that they're a professional qualified by the Secretary of Interior's professional standards. And we're trying to clarify this for people when you fill out the form. But, you know, I think you can check other, or you can check your interest there. I do just want to note on the feedback form, please give us feedback related to the ConnCRIS application. We have had a couple of people submit general inquiries about our programs, or tell me about areas that they would like to see surveyed. Those should just be general inquiries to our office, but we do very much encourage your comments and corrections to the map, or your comments on the usability, especially because, you know, remembering that we were scanning from fiche and populating our database with information from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So there's a lot of legacy information, and I think having everybody who is local and knowledgeable tell us, hey, move this point over 100 feet is going to make it a much better application.
Great. Well, I want to sort of start to wrap things up here because I realize we've gone a couple of minutes over time. There are a few remaining questions. So Kevin and Jenny, if you're able to stay on for another few minutes, I don't know if you are, but we do have about 4 or 5 questions that have come in that I'd love to be able to pose to you after we're finished.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, great.
I have like 1 minute.
Okay,
I
great.
would say we also welcome emails as well if your question isn't answered. We're happy to talk with you some more.
Great. Excellent. Well, one was just a suggestion about, organizational access, like could an individual historical society like get one account so as not to use up all those logins? And similarly for a firm, like a CRM firm or something like that, that wanted to use this, is that the best practice to get it at the organizational level with you guys so as not to eat up a bunch of your like logins?
Yeah, that would probably be, that's the best way for it. It
Yeah.
depends on how much use is going to be, the organization is going to be needing. If there's going to be a lot of concurrent people using it, then they might want to request more than one access. But if it's only going to be one person here or there using the application, then we would prefer that it just, as an organization, request it. Yeah.
All right. If a building in a historic district or from a survey has been demolished, can that be noted on information within the map? How are demolitions handled?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do have a note in the pop-up box. So when you click on a point, you get a bunch of information in a pop-up box. It will say demolished or partially demolished. And I did actually just have one local preservation organization send me some documentation of recently demolished stuff, and we're figuring out, how if something's been surveyed, we can attach to that survey form kind of a cover memo that says demolished and the date. We are, however, retaining the point and the previous documentation so that it will still be available to view.
Thank you for that. With that, I want to thank you both, Jenny and Kevin, for your time today. This has been a great introduction, and it's got the wheels turning in my head as well. I hope everyone who's here with us today is also getting ideas about how they might be using this. So thanks so much to you and to the State Historic Preservation Office for this incredible work. And thanks to all of you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.